Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cornerstone, the spirit led entrepreneur. Let me tell you guys a story. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. A story about three guys that went on a reality TV show for entrepreneurs, and we banded together in our brotherhood of Christianity and decided to do a recap, you know, podcast about our experience on the show and going over the lessons that we learned and sharing those things with you guys. And here, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. So I'm Niagara Nick. My business that I went on the show with was Explore Niagara. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for all things to do in Niagara Falls. So you can find me on Instagram at Niagara_Nick. But yeah, so just wanted to introduce what I do, and why don't you guys tell us a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, I think the challenge for this day in the show was doing a 40-second elevator pitch.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is they gave us a very specific thing to follow. And I found it odd that how many people like just went bullet point instead of making it flow and feel right. And so here's my elevator pitch. My name is Dr. Dave Harvitz with Renew Concierge Physical Therapy. We're a mobile orthopedic physical therapy practice here in Pensacola, specializing in pain with movement. So if you've got pain with movement, we fix that. And we don't just fix easy stuff. We actually specialize in the hard stuff. And we actually specialize in fixing people who've been wronged and struggling with the Medicare and medical system in general, because it doesn't really treat you right. And so with us, we actually offer a money back guarantee. And so with Renewy, you have nothing to lose except your pain.
Love it. That's awesome. And hey guys, my name is Jewett. I'm the founder of Starving Artist Courses, which is your all-in-one online music education resource. We specifically are in Maywood, Illinois, but we are a virtual business, so you can learn from anywhere, and you can learn from the comfort of your home, your favorite songs, your favorite music, step by step. So our kind of motto is dreaming out loud, because we focus on music and the songs that you dream to learn or the instruments you love and want to play. You are able to do it with Starving Artist Courses. So really excited to have you guys here. And if you guys want to sign up for any of these businesses here, make sure you go ahead and do that before this episode is over.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard for me, but I will tell you, Jewett, there was a time where I dated a girl in high school who was left-handed and played guitar. Well, I learned bass and she learned guitar, and she was left-handed though. And so anything I learned on guitar, I learned left-handed. But
Oh, no way.
I played the bass right-handed.
That's crazy. So you're playing guitar left.
Yeah.
That's insane. I can't play left. Nope.
And so then what ended up happening is like, now I know how to play Stairway to Heaven, but if I'm going to play, I got to play a right-handed backwards.
That's
or upside down. Like Jimi Hendrix.
No way.
Yeah.
That's funny. We got to play together now, man. I didn't know you played.
I'm not that good anymore. I could not jam.
Right.
And so
like, I played drums in high school, but does that count?
That definitely counts. That was my first instrument.
Yeah. Well, I also took German in high school, and interesting story. There was a lady at Niagara Falls just sitting there, and she asked me a couple questions. And I swear I knew just barely enough context clues in what she was asking to know what her question was. And I knew just enough basic answers to give her the answers in German. And then I left and I was like, that lady thinks I'm fluent in German right now.
Nice. That was the book of action, man. The Lord gave you different tongues right at that moment.
That's right. I mean, it's amazing what you can retain, what little bits you still hold on to. So
that's true.
So if you guys have any questions for us, we're going to be talking about branding and storytelling tonight. But if you have any questions for us, feel free to leave them in the comments. We'll be glad to get to your questions live. And don't forget to subscribe and like and, share our video.
All right. Well,
so Dr. Dave, take it away. You're kind of you're the expert.
I'm the expert
on like
of
just
branding, huh? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I
See,
mean, okay, maybe not branding. I got storytelling with tour guiding, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm good
yeah, I
at
was going
that.
to say
Duet,
the
you are a
storyteller.
branding pro.
Yeah. I don't know about that. And Dr. Davis both. How about that?
Oh,
That's
I don't
right.
know about that.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you guys, with branding, I think it's really important for us to recognize that a brand is just a logo. If you
Mhm.
just have a logo and you have a brand, it's all you need.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
And there goes everyone watching.
No, no,
Every-
that's what I was gonna say.
someone's gonna clip
These
that.
guys have no idea what they're talking about.
I was gonna say, so we're gonna mute Dr. Dave and keep this
That's
going.
right. See, that's how much of a expert I am. And so someone's going to clip that and humiliate me on the internet.
Yeah.
And so in
That's
any
funny.
case, no, a brand is not a logo. So what is a brand? Listen, a brand is your perception. It's what people perceive you to be, and then the reputation that you leave behind, right? And so it's really important for us to recognize that there is so much that goes into a brand, and it's something that you develop and you don't just create. And so it's a process, the process of consistent putting out of all the things that is your business. And one of the things I love about this this topic is that we have an intimate relationship with the storyteller, and that's the Father in heaven. Most of the Bible is narrative, and most of Jesus's teaching is in parables, which is interesting because a parable is not just a story, it's a story with a purpose. And at the same time, we as believers in Christ should also have a story with a purpose, whether we're talking about ourselves in our business or if we're talking about just the Lord in general. And so one of the things that I also recognize too is that we are a walking story, right? And so when what I mean by that is this, like, you're a testimony. If you're a believer in Christ, you have a testimony, and that testimony can speak to anybody. But how you portray it, and when you portray it, and how you talk about it, you can either be very effective or not so effective. And so there's things we need to recognize is that overall we're always telling stories, and so in all walks of life, whether it's in business, personal relationships, at church, or at the supermarket, we tend to be telling stories, and the stories are really good to tell get your point across. And nobody wants to hear a bullet point list of the things you do in your business, when sometimes a story can convey all of that. So guys, do you remember was this the night that we did the commercial on the blocks off? Was that what that was?
No, I think that was the episode that I won. That was the second, that day 2.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah,
That
that was the second one. Yeah.
What was the
Yeah,
competition
that's
for
right.
this one?
For this one,
You had to pitch something.
That's a
I think,
good
probably.
question. You guys remember?
yeah.
I'm sure we can look it up.
I feel like
That's how. Yeah, we all
Yeah.
binged it like months ago. So
Right. Yeah, guys, we're gonna
I
pause this to
know.
go rewatch episode 4 real quick.
yeah,
Yes,
right.
Let me just watch
So-
this real quick. But
All right. So I'll move on. So so one of the things that we need to recognize. So when we talk about branding storytelling, you storytell about your brand, and I think that's kind of one of the things I took away from this is that we're constantly talking to people about our businesses. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we read the room. And I think that's something that's really, really important, is that you got to have the social and emotional intelligence. And I mean, this is something that you can develop. This is not something you're necessarily born with. But you need to have that kind of intelligence to read the room. Who are you talking to? Why are you talking to them? Do you have an alternative motive, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but do you have a motive? Do you have a goal? Do you have a purpose? Why are you there? Why are they there? All of these questions about who you're talking to and why is one form or another of pitching. And so you can have your 40-second commercial, which, by the way, if you are a small business owner and you do not have a 40-second elevator pitch, you need to get one. And then you got to look in yourself in the mirror and you need to say it out loud 1,000 times. Because if you do not, you're going to sound like a fool. And we don't want that for you. We want to come across confident and articulate with what you're talking about, so that when you go and talk to someone and say, yeah, I'm a business owner and this is what I do, they get the message, they get it quick, because a lot of times the brain just starts going and the eyes gloss over. There's a few people out there that do that a lot, and it's hard to pay attention. But you can also be
That was
pitching.
one of the
Yeah.
sorry, I can say that was one of the things that Wes had mentioned was one of the advantages of being on the show is like we're gonna essentially have to give that 40-second pitch over and over and over and over again while we're on the show.
Yeah.
You know, so when we had to do so many reps of that pitch throughout that week, you know, it was just good practice. So
Yeah.
I'd recommend that. Get yourself in situations where you have practice, networking events, stuff like that. It'll give you opportunity to say it over and over. And then when you have to say it to somebody that's like, man, I need to nail this 40 seconds because if I lose them within that first 40 seconds, I'm going to miss out on a good opportunity. You know, you'll have some practice under your belt.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then and from Dr. Dave's point, speaking about the brain, we were mentioning that how like people receive information differently. So we broke down, and there's different sections, different ways that people take information. So there's the neocortex. Remember we mentioned that, and that's kind of the complex area of the brain. Then you got the crocodile brain. We want to be able to feed to the crocodile brain. We want to be able to hit. They kind of say like that's the gatekeeper, if you want to say, like if you can get past that point, then you kind of got the person, because that's the attention that you're going to get. That those few moments you're going to be able to captivate them right there, to draw them in, to buy into what you're selling. You know, so it's very important to the crocodile brain is just kind of just keeping it basic, nice and basic, just hitting the point so people understand, you know, exactly what your business is just from that conversation.
You know, I was cringing the whole time because he's talking about crocodile brain and neocortex. I'm like, well, just called the cortex. and then the whole crocodile. I mean, it's not how the brain works, guys. However, it's a great analogy. And you know, really what we're referring to is you have these higher level functioning areas where we're going to critically think about things. But in order to get there from a social perspective, right, you got to start simple and allow the patient to be like, hey, okay, I got it. And then once they get it, they get to move on forward, right? You don't start with the complex stuff first. I think that's really important to recognize.
Exactly. That's it.
I even notice that a lot too. Like when I'm talking to a guest that's calling in, and they're looking for what there is to do in Niagara Falls, I can't just be like, "Oh, and then you're going to go to the Cave of the Winds," and then and just expect them to know what the Cave of the Winds. I have to say, like, and then you're going to go to the Cave of the Winds, which is the stairway that takes you down to the base of the Bridal Veil Falls. You know, I have to like mention that. Even something like Maid of the Mist, like in my head, well, obviously everybody knows what the Maid of the Mist is, which I have to mention in there, Maid of the Mist, which is the boat ride that takes you into the Horseshoe Falls. You know, if I don't mention that, even something like that, I've already lost them. And now while they're still trying to figure out what was I talking about, I can't explain anything further. I kind of have to backtrack and re-explain that, or at least answer that question.
What you're describing is the presenter's problem.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of what we learned on the blocks, was what the presenter's problem is. So, Duet, you had a point.
Yeah, I was going to say something. I don't even know if you guys remember a couple episodes back, I was mentioning how I'm really trying to focus in on actually creating an actual official hiring process as it relates to bringing on people on the team and things like that. Because initially I would just kind of just bring, you know, great musicians on, help out and things like that. But I realized that you can be a great musician and not necessarily know how to teach the basics. And the storytelling is all completely in, you know, teaching music. An example is I had a specific instructor who, when they had a new student who's just fresh on their instrument, going straight to these crazy musical terms and like trying to break down these different chords and scales and different things like that. I was like, yo, bro, like head to side, like, you know, we got to first kind of just tell them, like, you know, there's 6 strings on the guitar, there's 12 notes, this is the bridge, this is the nut, this is, you know, break down those parts first, then go into, you know, scale, whole step, half step, start from there, and then start going into, you know, X, Y, and Z. And then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, because I got to remember, because you got to kind of roll back, because when you become an expert at something, you can kind of get those first basic steps when you first started. To be able to instruct or help, you have to be able to think from that perspective of who you're speaking to as much as possible. And that could, you know, that takes practice, that takes just even having notes and just trying to backtrack those notes all the way back if you can. I don't know. Have you guys watched The Chosen?
Oh yeah.
I've seen a good portion of it.
Yeah, so good. So on The Chosen, season 3, season 3 with the the loaves.
Spoiler alert. Go on.
Yeah. I mean, if you read the Bible, you already know it.
Spoiled. What happens?
What was cool was like had it shown like the
Read the
humanity of Jesus, which is what I love. And it's showing because we read the scriptures over the years, but I never thought from the perspective Sermon on the Mount, Jesus had to prepare that sermon, and he was like practicing, and he was practicing and getting it tight, So that's the same thing with our storytelling and branding. We want to be able to just go over this and just repeat it over and over, which was again a super amazing benefit on the show. The repetition, above anything else, just repeating it and pitching it with so many different people. That was like the most beautiful part.
Yeah, I can commiserate with your problem hiring great musicians that may not be good teachers.
Yeah.
And what was interesting for me is when I started training PTs to come on board my practice, I took things for granted. I'm like, oh yeah, of course you would know this, but then they don't. And then you have to start from square one, because as you become an expert in anything, all the simple basic things become intertwined with the complex things. Like you assume all the basic stuff, and then you're operating at a higher level. And so what we need to do as business owners is come down a couple steps and say, here's how we do things in my business. And so just to touch on like kind of how we talk about our businesses, and this is a little bit on topic because we also want to talk about what it looks like to pitch. So there's different kinds of pitching, right? So you're talking to the crocodile brain, you're talking to the people in the simplest terms. You're not using, big language like half notes and whole notes. What we are talking about is simplicity for our audience. There's certain conversations that you might have that might be 5 or 10 minutes. There's a strategy to that. If you're doing a 45-minute presentation, there's a strategy for that as well. Same thing true with negotiations, collaborations, or partnerships. All of those things are forms of pitching that you do need to be skilled in some capacity. And so one of the things that I've personally saw a lot with business owners, and it's one of the biggest mistakes I see them making, is that they talk too much as I sit here and monopolize our time. And what I mean by that is they talk about themselves. They talk about what they offer, how great their product or their service is, all the great features of their business. And meanwhile, like, you have no idea like who this person is that you're talking to. So really, my exhortation to our business owners listening is this: listen first. And here's why. When you listen, you get to learn about who they are. You learn about what they do, where they're coming from, their education level or their knowledge base on certain topics. You start to get it. You create the picture. And then when you start talking about yourself, guess what you can do? You can actually cater your message to that person, as opposed to winging it because you've never met this person. I love being the second person to talk when I'm in a networking meeting or networking group, because I can then talk to that person in a way that they understand me. And that's a pro tip for anyone out there just starting out. Listen to them. And what's really great about this too is, let's say I meet someone, me personally, maybe I meet a gym owner, and we start talking a little bit. I would ask them, hey, tell me about your business. What do you do? What's your model? Do you offer personal training, or do you just have an open gym? Do you offer kinds of classes? Do you do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm engaged. I'm listening. I want to know. But then you know what he's going to do? He's going to reveal pain points. He's going to reveal problems in his business. He's going to reveal things that work really, really well for him. And guess what I get to do? I get to come in and say, hey, I bet I can help with that. All of a sudden, I've got a partnership, right? And so I just want to encourage everyone out there, when you're a business owner and you're out there networking, marketing, pitching your brand, pitching your story about your company, put the brakes on, open your ears, listen first, because I know one more thing too. The Bible does say that the person who speaks a lot is be revealed to be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But then, even if you are stupid, but your mouth is shut, you're thought wise.
Mm-hmm. Love it. That's so good. I want to kind of piggyback off of that, taking it back to scripture. Jesus spent 30 years just listening, preparing, studying people, having, relationships, conversations with people, so that when he went into ministry, as the scriptures say, pretty much all the times that he spoke to everyone, it was in parables. He was telling stories all the time. And these stories were simple. They were complex. They were still trying to figure it out. But the analogies and stories he was using was everyday basic stuff. He knew that this was a culture that, planted and farmed and, could understand hierarchy, kingship, and slaves and all these different things. They understood those concepts. He kept it, general and basic for everyone to be able to, comprehend it, or rather to relate to it, and it's all about being relatable with the storytelling and everything. The pain points of just like, man, I understand. Like for me, I went into teaching because, again, when I went to school, I studied architecture, which I'm not practicing, but that's why I got my degree in architecture. But a lot of the classes we took, or rather, a lot of the deliverables that we needed to do were not even classes we took. We had to learn all this stuff on our own. So it's like we had to have these amazing drawings, AutoCAD, all these different things up. But there wasn't like an AutoCAD 101 or anything like that. We were all just literally just staying up, working together, trying to figure this stuff out. And that's when I was like, man, like if we had this opportunity before, this would have been so much easier. So for anyone who really wants to go into it or perform or do different things like that, that's why I'm like, let's teach you guys the basics, get you started, and then you go ahead and venture out from there, so you have some type of background. So that's kind of where the heart of it, came from.
Nick, you got anything for us?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jim Harris, thanks for watching. He just commented on there, be quick to listen, slow to speak, from James 1. So, yeah, I mean, it was just kind of echoing what you were saying, but yeah, I wanted to give a little shout out there. How do you listen spiritually with your clients? So here, I'll tap onto this. So part of it comes with discernment, just understanding their needs, their desires, like what it is that they want, but then also what they need. Sometimes you can understand someone's need before they even realize it. And that's something, I mean, at least in my business, like being a tour guide, often we tell people what their vacation should look like rather than asking them. Sometimes if you ask them a little bit, they're like, I don't know. That's why I called you. So we kind of have to know them and what they want better than they know themselves, because we know what's available. But I also think that you have to be mindful of where somebody is at. So for example, I have a lot of stories that I tell on my tour that, they talk about the rainbow and Noah's Ark. I talk about some miracles that have happened, but both of those stories are towards the end of one of my tours. And I'm a little bit mindful of, okay, where is everybody at? How well is this going to be received? The seed that I'm about to plant, am I about to just throw this against some hard concrete, or is this going to get planted in some right soil? So you kind of have to till that land a little bit. Even in just saying this, I was like, man, I'm getting into parables. I'm getting into things where it's like, oh wait, maybe somebody doesn't have an idea what it is that I'm talking about. You can kind of have a tendency to do that, and just in Christianity in general, when you start to get into it. Our pastor just gave an analogy of, like say you're getting somebody to go and you're teaching them about baptism, and be like, all right, you're about to get washed in the blood of Jesus. Somebody might hear that and be like, wait, what are we doing? Yeah, I'm out. Like, I'm not doing that. So yeah, you kind of have to be mindful of where that person is and use some discernment with that.
Yeah, that's good. I was gonna piggyback, unless you had something, Dr. Dave.
No, go ahead. I can round it out.
Okay. Yeah. So based off of that, I'm actually thinking of now the branding side of things, because the big thing we talked about with branding was like we essentially are our brand. So
I do want to say something then. Let me interrupt you then because
Oh,
you're
yeah.
moving on.
Yeah.
I want to talk about like what it means to like listen spiritually to your clients, or like the spirit-led listening that was asked about it. There's two things that I do. First of all, I ask God this question, and this is not just for business. This is for life. I say, "Hey God, how do you feel about this person?"
Mhm.
Let that soak. God, what do you say about this person? And here's what's great is there if there's anything negative, if there's any bitterness in your own heart and it comes out, you're like, ugh, that is not from the Lord. You have really clear checks and balances
Yeah.
with how God feels about anybody. And so when you're in relationship with somebody, whether it's in personal relationship or business relationship, and you're like having a hard time, or you're not too sure, or maybe you're just like looking for extra compassion for somebody. For me in my field, it's all the time. I'm just asking the Lord, how do you feel about this person? What do you say about this person? And then I listen. And a lot of times it's like, that's my daughter. I love her dearly. Take care of her. I've entrusted you, right? That kind of stuff. And that when I say like, oh, that's my daughter, it might be like a 45-year-old, really, really difficult person who I don't like very much. But then that's how the Lord feels about that person. And then another thing that I do very often, because I'm sure we all do this in business, is we're always solving problems. I do this in the middle of in front of people, but sometimes you can do this a little more comfortably behind a desk or not in front of a live person. But I always ask the Lord, what do you say about this situation or problem? Lord, what do you say about this? And a lot of times it's like I'm faced with a complex problem. Again, like I mentioned earlier in my 40-second pitch, is that we do treat complex chronic pain and we do not manage, we fix. And so when we fix, sometimes I got to go to the true fixer, the true healer, and ask him, Lord, what do you say about this situation? What is the system? What is the area of the back? What part of this body am I supposed to be treating? And so it's not just listening to others, but it's also listening to the Lord as you problem solve through some of the things that are brought up in your business day.
That's good.
Yeah. Now you can go into branding.
Yeah. So it actually, still connects to this question. So what I was going to say was, as far as branding, like my brand specifically is online, but then connecting with your clients, sometimes you got to pray on different situations, because sometimes I have requests of, do you do the lessons in person? And you can be like, okay, that could be, additional income there, but I know my model is specifically, making it virtual. But there's some situations, like, for example, some opportunities for mentorships. Like I have a student, at my church who really looks up to me as a bass player, and they want to do in-person lessons. Certain moments like that where it's like, hey, I can feed into this youth spiritually, invest in him, and teach him music as he wants to eventually maybe be a worship leader or a pastor in the future. I could do him in person, kind of make an exception with that. But just really just like praying on those things and making sure you're thinking spiritually as it comes to your clients. So yes, that's very key.
Very good. All right.
When you were talking about branding earlier, Jewett, about how like we are a story, we are a testimony. Dr. Dave, you were mentioning that. I was just thinking about like being the salt and the light. And I was also thinking about that verse that says, you'll know them by their fruit. And if you are hungry and you go off and you're in the wilderness and you find a tree and it has good fruit on it, you don't need to know what that tree is called right away. All you need to know is, wow, there's some good fruit there. And as people see that about you, that's what they're seeing. Now, if you come up straight up and be like, oh, I'm a Christian, blah, 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 and you're like just pitching all this Christianity, like terms and stuff, but they don't know anything about you. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. So they're going to see that fruit. They're going to be drawn to you. Then they're going to be wondering, what's up with this guy? Often I'm sure both of you guys have had this situation happen where someone will be like, you're a Christian, aren't you? And then it opens up another conversation. Sometimes they're also a Christian and that's why they recognize it. Sometimes they're just hungry and they see some good fruit.
Mhm.
So
That's
So
right.
good. So good. It's a whole different level with our businesses because right there, like same like you said, our spirituality, our brand, how we do things properly with our business and operate how God wants us to and everything. That's showing the whole story. That's what brings people back to you. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like one of the good things about our business, being business owners that are Christians, is we truly do get to infuse the Lord into our business.
Mhm.
I'm sure we can get all into you know what um, what we do to infuse the Lord in our business and kind of what that looks like and how we brand as Christian owners. And that's something that um, I think it looks different for everybody, but at the same time, it's important for everybody.
Mhm.
And how you infuse the Lord in your business is He's going to work with all of us very differently, and it's really important. I always tell people that like my business is a business, but it's a ministry in disguise,
Yeah.
right? That's really
yeah,
what it is. It looks like we got another question. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
let's see here.
So
Uh, go ahead. You want to? I'll ask it.
you go
What
ahead.
do you guys suggest as a path or steps to developing a spirit-led business brand? How did you? How did your individual brands develop? Well, mine's actually too easy because I was so it's a short story. I'll tell it to you. When I first started my business a little over 3 years ago, I was asking, "All right, God, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm a runner. I want to be with runners. I want to work with runners. I want to do athletes, and I'm going to do the sports. And I'm interested in the sports. I like football. I want to play with football players. It's going to be great." And the Lord stopped me in my tracks. He said, "Nope."
Mhm.
And how did I? And here's the thing: how did I develop the brand? I asked the Lord. Lord, what do you say? Right.
Mhm.
And so going back to Him, okay, why am I? What am I going to do? Who am I going to? Who my brand is centered around who I'm targeting, right? And so my brand was always going to be excellence in one way or another, but excellence for who? And so as I was praying over who I was going to target, the Lord was very clear. Dave, you're not going to work with athletes. And I was like, dang it, because that's where my heart was. And the Lord said, "Look, Dave," and this is directly, not an audible, but boy, it was a sense and a very strong feeling that came up out of nowhere. And the Lord said, "Dave, I want you to go heal my people so they can worship me." And that's where the chronic pain came from. I'm like, okay, because you know what? They're in bondage, just like Moses was. He goes to Moses and said, "Go free my people so they can worship me in the wilderness." And the Lord came to me and said, "Dave, I want you to go heal my people, get them out of the bondage of sickness and pain, and then so that they can go worship me." And there was countless people that I know that would come to me and say, "Hey, Dave, I couldn't raise my arm to worship. Now I can."
Mhm.
Right. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm fulfilling my purpose.
Yeah.
And that's how my brand developed, is that I was listening for the Lord to give me instruction right from the get-go.
Mhm. I love it. That's awesome. I'll jump in next if that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So even just the name, I remember initially coming up with the name Starving Artist. So obviously we have that play on words. We already know Starving Artist is just what people say as far as artists. But when I created it's created that conversation where I point back to Jesus because people have had that little joke, and I said, actually, I came up with the name because I'm talking about starving and yearning for your creativity to be unlocked. Because I feel like how the scripture start off the very first verse, God shows Himself first as a creator, not as a judge or someone who is too far away for us to have a relationship with Him. He shows right away as a creator, and if we are from Him, we create as well. So we're looking like Him in that respect, as far as having our creativity to be unlocked and things like that, having conversations with people and everything. So that's pretty much like how I've kind of gotten to the point of having those conversations with different individuals, and it's just been great. What about you, Nick?
For me, I mean, there's lots of God sprinkled throughout my business. One thing that I was trying to be mindful of is having God be the center of my business and honor God, but not use God as a hook to sell tours. You know what I mean? To not be like, hey, I'm a Christian business. Are you a Christian? You should choose my tour because you're a Christian too. You know, I didn't want to take advantage of God. I wanted to honor God. So little things in there. So like you see my logo right there. So it's me and my wife, she fell for me. Just kidding. Gotta wait a second, let that land. But I was very intentional to make sure that, you know, there's all 7 colors in the rainbow. Um, you know, God's promise that He gave to us. I'm intentional to make sure that we're closed on Sundays. You know, I want my employees to be able to spend time with their family. I make sure that our guides and all of our employees are paid well so that they can have, you know, a livable wage and they don't have to worry about week to week, what am I going to do in the off season, things like that. And then also all of our employees, they make what a typical person is making in 40 hours. They're making that usually in like 5 hours a day. So 25 hours. So they work the mornings and then they get to go home and spend time with their families and they don't have to worry about who's letting their kids off the bus or, you know, do I have to put my kid in daycare? And if I'm putting my kid in daycare while somebody else is raising my kid, I'm going to go to work and by the end of the week and after paying for daycare, I'm going to make $100 for the week. You know, I'd gladly I told my wife, like, hey, I will gladly go out and drive Lyft extra on top of what I'm doing until I make $100 a week. If that means that you get to watch our kids and raise our kids, and you know, and thankfully, from being an entrepreneur after some time, I know a lot of people say that like, oh yeah, I hated my 9 to 5, so instead of working 40 hours a week, I decided to quit and become an entrepreneur, and now I work 24/7. But I'm very intentional with taking time for my family, and I'm not spending my entire life diving into my business, you know, and I have the same thing for my employees because what kind of a hypocrite would I be if I'm like, oh, I started this so I could do this, but you people, you all work your, you know, your nails away, so
there you go.
so I can do it.
You know, what's interesting is you make a really great point there, Nick, is you say that your brand is not always a brand to customers. Sometimes it's a brand to employees.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Too.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so,
and then my employees then in turn become the brand as well because they go and they love their job every day.
Yeah.
And tourists are happier with a tour guide that loves their job than a tourist. I took one tour once, it was a walking tour, and our guy was miserable, gave great information, showed us everything that we wanted, turned it into a game, but you could tell that this guy's like 8th time doing it for the day, and he did not love his job. Like, how do you be a tour guide and not love your job? So that's what I'm here for.
You ever heard of Nick, I'm sure you have Young Life. They have it's like a high school ministry for you know, and they have like a camp that they take kids to and they play and they do all the cool things. And I was talking to a guy who was one of the counselors there, and he was working in the kitchen. He didn't work with kids or anything. He just worked the kitchen. He was serving there. And we were talking. He goes, yeah, like, you know, I get up every day, and my job is the eggs. My job is to make the eggs. And he's like, look, if I don't do my eggs right, and they're runny, some kid's gonna have a runny egg day, and that's my job to prevent that.
Love
you know,
it.
and it's just that. Like, that was his mentality. And he's like in the back. He didn't need to have a great attitude. He could have been like, rah, grumble. But no, he's out there. He had the joy of the Lord in his heart, making eggs. And so no matter what we're doing in our lives, we can draw from the Lord through the Spirit to really, truly walk in joy, regardless of what we're being called to do in the season that we're in.
Amen.
So, but speaking of the season that we're in, sometimes people are not lined up for what season you're in. You're in the season of networking, marketing, pitching. You're going out there and you're grinding. You're doing the work. And then the people who you're trying to pitch and work with and partner with, and they're not having it, right? And I will tell you, most people are going to ignore you or not want to have anything to do with you, with your business. And it's a numbers game. You're going to get 1,000 no's and a couple of yeses. And those yeses are going to be worth a lot of money. Like if we're just talking business, right? And so it's really important for us to recognize that it's a numbers game when we're going out there and networking, because all you need is that one referral source. All you need is that one person that really is electric for your business. And whether it's like building a brand in the culture that you have in your business or the culture that people see from outside and are drawn to.
Yeah.
And so really what happens is a lot of people are just constantly bombarded with pitches and commercials, and whether it's TikTok or calls, sales calls. I mean, I got like 4 or 5 texts today from Pennsylvania, of all places, where I'm from, for, hey, can we have some of your time to ask you about a political poll? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, constantly being bombarded with stuff. And so they're not going to want to hear what you have to say. And so you really have to be prepared, whether it's potential clients or prospects. They are going to be, if they're going to give you any attention, they're going to be focused on the big picture, simple ideas. Don't talk too much, but I'll give you 5 seconds. And in that first 5 to 10 seconds, your job is to earn the next 45 seconds. And so how do you do that? You do that by recognizing a couple things. Number one, context matters. And what does that mean? If I know I'm going to a gym owner who has sent me 5 or 10 patients in the last month, I'm going to treat that guy a little different than the guy who called me and said, hey, you hurt one of my clients, right? And I don't know who you are, right? Now, all of a sudden, that context changes. And you know what I didn't get to do? I didn't get to choose that context, right? And so we must be prepared on all fronts. And this comes full circle to what we talked about in our first episode, but it brings me back to Nehemiah's story. He did not know when the opportune moment was going to occur, but he was ready and he was in prayer for it. And a lot of times we think that this morning I'm in a group that we pray and intercede for businesses every Thursday morning. And one of the things that we were talking about this morning was, do we just pray and ask God for things in our business? And there's a passive position saying, hey, God, can you give me and bless me? And look, God in heaven right there is saying, yes, son, yes, daughter, I want to do that for you. But there's also another position. You can declare, you can say, look, God, I'm going for this benchmark. Join me, please, Father, because I want your blessing as I go through this, because I'm going. And boy, is it going to be easier because I want to do it with you, Father. Right. And so I think we need to recognize that we need to have a position of action and not a position of passivity in our businesses if we want them to succeed. I'm not saying strive. I'm not saying work too hard and ignore your family. I'm not saying do all the don't go overboard here. The interesting thing about the Bible is that it's got these checks and balances. It's got the verse that says, hey, don't go that far. And then he's got like for the people who are too judgmental. And then you got the verse that says, hey, look, sin's a thing. Like there's don't, you know what I'm saying? Like the Bible brings the two standard deviations back into the center a little bit if we're listening with our hearts and our minds through the Spirit. And so in any case, Nehemiah was ready. And what I mean by he was ready, he was in prayer. And so when we talk about context mattering and kind of how to handle each context in which you're going to be presented with your business, you need to be in prayer and you need to know what you're getting yourself into as best to your knowledge. Because what will happen is that the Lord will go before you and he will prepare a way for you. Not just spiritually in heaven, of course, but even in this world to come. Like he goes out and drives out your enemies before you. He did it 1,000 times for David. He'll do it for you 1,000 times. And there is favor that can go through working through your life if you're listening, and not just listening to others, which is important, but also to the Lord.
Yeah,
All right.
since I've started my business, I find favor around every corner. But I
Mhm.
think part of that is, you have to be prayed up and recognize that and walk through that door when it comes. And I think that's kind of what you were saying is like, don't just passively go into your business, but like be prepared that, all right, Lord, what does he want me to do today? And walk through those doors as they open themselves up and use some discernment to see this may look like a good opportunity, but is this gonna eventually blow up in your face? I've had a couple situations already in my business where it's like, oh man, this is such a great opportunity. Look how awesome I'm gonna look when I do this. And it turned out into like maybe you shouldn't have went and done that. Like, good for you that you're in this position, but ultimately I have more important things for you to be working on than your focus needs to be here instead of over there. So
What's interesting is that you can, God can be giving you favor all over the place, and you can still fumble the ball.
yeah,
Like there's still a role we play. And that's just being excellent in your work, excellent in what we do, right? And that actually brings me to another point I wanted to make is that, Proverbs 22:29, and this is something that has been at the forefront of my business from the very beginning, because when people ask me what's your brand, my brand is excellence, period. That's all it is, excellence. Excellence in what? Now we have a conversation, right? I don't have to necessarily go into all the details of what PT is. Most of the time, people don't even know what it is. But I will tell you this: Proverbs 22:29 says, "Do you see a man excellent or skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." And this, is just it continues to come up in my mind and my heart all the time, because ultimately, what is your brand? Your brand is your reputation that goes before you and then comes behind you. You leave it in the wake of your business. And what we really want to be doing, if we're truly walking out our faith, is that we should be excellent in what we do. Nick, you should be absolutely the best tour guide in Niagara, bar none. And, Duet, not just yourself, but you should be employing, the best teaching musicians you can, because that's who you are. Because we do represent the Lord in all that we do. And no matter what we do, we should do unto the Lord. And so it's important for us to recognize that when we're building a brand, that it's not, when you are a Christian, you are not just representing yourself. You are representing the Lord in all that you do. And so when you go to the chiropractor, you go to the physical therapist, let's go to the PT, and the PT is just like sitting there typing on his computer, not talking to you and giving you a bunch of exercises, not listening to you and not really solving your problems. Oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Oh, okay. That's not it. You're not, it's icky. Because what you don't want to do is represent the Lord in a way. Now look, you don't have to be the best, but you gotta hold yourself with excellence, right? And I'm not saying you gotta be the best musician in the world. You gotta be, you know what I'm saying? Like that can be prideful and that can be perfectionistic to a bad way. But what we ought to be doing is working towards perfecting our craft, our business in a way that honors the Lord. And what's interesting? I was telling my daughter, she was, very much, she gets overwhelmed when I ask her to do something. I'm like, hey, Addison, I want you to go do this, like clean your room. And she goes, oh my gosh, I can't do it. And then she'll go in there, she'll figure it out, and then it's not done well. And I come back in, I'm like, Addison, this is not done well. And she goes, I can't be perfect. And I'm like, you're right, you can't be perfect. I'm not asking for perfect, I'm asking for your best. What is your best? Is this your best? No, it's not. Okay. Give me your best, Addison. What does that look like? And it doesn't look like a perfectly clean room, but it does look like a heart. Now let's pretend my daughter goes in and she's, working diligently with a joyful heart, and she's singing songs and she's playing while she works in a way that is productive And then she comes out, "Hey, Daddy, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Ooh, boy, like that doesn't look good." There's a different conversation between my daughter and I when she is, even though not doing well, she's doing what she can with a heart that matters. And so as we go out into the world, we want to make sure that we have the heart to serve and love and draw that excellence from the Lord. We want to be leading people in conversation that benefits them, not just ourselves. We want to be serving first, and ultimately, and this is a BNI thing. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Business Networking International. It's a networking type of group that they for those that don't know. And their big motto, their big thing is givers gain. And it's so true.
Love it.
Go into a situation and give as much as you can and lay it all out for somebody.
Yeah.
It's a good business model to do that.
Mhm. Yep. That's awesome. I love that. That goes, oh man, that ties in so well with branding. Like you want to be able to be a business that just gives. Like it's one that's just universal truth. It's like it's one of those things that point to God. You can't comprehend it. It's just the law that he created is when you give, you just can't outgive him, and he just gives it back.
That's a really good point.
There's no way to like kind of like analyze it or compute it. It's just how God just works and operates. So it's great to build your brand on that from the beginning. I think we were mentioning that before, how every month I want to get back to every month we were doing like giveaways, like drumsticks, and you guys, a fresh pair of drumsticks, instruments, whatever, different things like that. We were doing these giveaways. It was fantastic. And just getting back on that rhetoric, because that was just really fun. People are enjoying it, and just knowing like, man, they're giving, I want to sign up for this, So, yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned, like kind of give, like you can't outgive God. That's not where I was going with it. And that's exactly right, though. You brought out that biblical principle of sowing, right? When you sow a seed, it doesn't just come back void of any good thing, right? But here's the thing, though, you do reap what you sow. And so if you're sowing a servant's heart, you're going to be served, and you're going to reap the goodness of the good fruits of the Spirit. But if we're sowing into our business and our relationships, some of the negative things of the flesh, you're going to reap the negative things of the flesh, and it's not good, right? And so absolutely be sowing good things in your business, because it doesn't just come back like 2 for 2, right? It comes back 100-fold.
Yeah.
Especially when the Lord's involved. He's like, oh man, like my son's doing what I like to do, like him to do. I just want to just completely bless that guy.
Yeah. It's interesting. As we read about the talents, and now, he gave some, 10, what was it? 10, 5, 2, something like that. Or, whatever the amount was, he gave the talents. And then for those who actually invested it, he said, now, it didn't say like, oh, now I'm going to bless you more. He said, I'm going to give you more responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like an awesome perspective, because everything we have, we're stewards of it. So instead of the perspective like, oh, God bless me with more, increased money and things like that, that's fine. But it's more so like, Lord, I want to be more of a steward for you, and I will steward this well if you will be willing to, bless me or entrust me to do that. So I was praying that this week. I was like, man, let me think of it more from a stewardship perspective with all the blessings we have, and be like, man, God, I'm down. I'm ready, take on more. You got something else you want me to, take on? And then give me the grace and give me the knowledge about your Holy Spirit to be able to manage it well, So, yeah.
Nick, you want to close this?
I was going to say, my wife and I were just talking about that with being a good steward. And, I want to honor God with whatever it is that he trusts me with. And something that I've noticed is the times of my life when I haven't been a good steward, my income could be crazy, like in a good way. But I wasn't being a good steward with it. And I still find myself in that same hard place that I found myself in the days when my income was very little. And I decided to not be a good steward. It's because I've realized that money is not something that God's bound by. Like the amount that he can bless you is infinite. He could literally give you everything, you
Mhm.
know. But is it better to trade your whole, your soul for the world? No,
Mhm.
that's not what we're here and in business for. So we have to be mindful of that, of keeping your relationship with God first and foremost is the most important thing that you can do wherever you are. You may not even be an entrepreneur and you're watching this. Maybe you're just thinking about being an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
but in your job that you're working right now, still give God your best, still be a good steward,
Mhm.
and I think that's what I was doing when I was a tour guide for another company. I was giving my best. And then this opportunity came and God entrusted me with more responsibility. And then I started my own tour company and I gave my best. And then God opened the door for me to have this opportunity to market my whole destination. And I'm going to give God my best in it. And so ultimately that's what it comes down to, is giving everything to the Lord and giving him the best. And he's going to honor that. He's going to honor that work that you do, because ultimately it's for his kingdom. That's the purpose of all of this. So next week, we are going to talk about early stage fundraising and deal structure. Dr. Dave, I know this
Ooh.
is a great episode for you.
Yeah, it is.
I would just like to say, if you have not watched The Blocks yet, you need to download the app. It's called The Blocks, and you need to watch Dr. Dave's performance in The Blocks Off for this upcoming episode.
Yeah.
That's your homework, all right? We don't give homework here, but if we're giving you homework before our next episode, you need to watch it, because not only is it educational, but it's also hilarious.
Oh yeah.
So
One of my
I
favorites. One of my favorites.
I feel like they cut out some of the funnier parts.
is
Uh,
it, man, being there live, it
Yeah,
was so funny.
it was
It
great.
was so funny.
I really had to put on my acting hat on, because I'll tell you what, it was not the kind of scenario I was expecting. I'm like ready to crunch numbers. I'm ready to
Yeah.
throw down, and they're like,
Man, and they were tugging on your heartstrings too. I would have cried. I cried both seasons I was on,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I definitely would have cried in your situation.
They
Wow.
weren't going to get me to cry. Nope.
Yeah,
Not happening.
they were gunning for it.
That was
But all right,
extra
well, thank you
particularly.
everybody for joining us, and we will see you all next week. Next week is going to be our final episode, so we are going to not only talk about the last episode of The Blocks, but we're also going to recap on the finale, the winners, one of them in the room with us. But yeah, so thank you everybody. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next week.
Nice. Bye guys.
Bye, guys.